in Bishkek. And this October, on the 11th and 12th of the month, we will be holding our 10th Life in Kyrgyzstan conference. So this is a very exciting year for us, and we're very excited to be launching the Life in Kyrgyzstan webinar today. And so without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Kanat Tilikeyev, who's going to chair this first Life in Kyrgyzstan webinar. Kanat.
Thank you, Chris. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kanat Tilikeyev. I am working at the Institute of Public Policy and Administration at the Graduate School of Development and the University of Central Asia. I'm Senior Research Fellow, and about 2 years ago, where everybody in the world was quite shocked with the start of military invasion of Russia to Ukraine. It was a huge and continuing to be one of the hugest humanitarian military catastrophe. It's increased seriously global instability in the world and also becoming very, very, let's say, big issue on European continent. But also we found that even Central Asian countries quite far from this conflict. There are a lot of different aspects which directly or indirectly impacted development of Central Asian nations. One of the things which we observed quite obviously was massive arrival of the Russian citizens to Kyrgyzstan, to many Central Asian countries, actually across the world. And also we become very interested how we as applied social researchers could reflect this new agenda. Therefore, we think about it, and we start to discuss how we can analyze it with the available data, which was inaccessible in 2022, but already about a year ago, we start to think, and we start to discuss with Aleksey, who was at the time in Bishkek, how we could jointly work on this topic. And we quite happy that Aleksey was so keen to participate in this study and becoming an author of this policy brief, which we concluded end of last year. So we're quite happy that we finalized this work, and it will be published today on the website of the University of Central Asia, I think immediately after this webinar. And you could on both languages, on English and on Russian. So floor is yours, Aleksey, and you can start the webinar itself.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will share my screen now, show you my presentation. Yes, so I'm very proud to start this series of webinars, Life in Kyrgyzstan. And as Kanat told, this is the joint work with Kanat Tilikeyev and Chris Gary. And this is devoted to the impact, so our analytical discussion on the impact of the war in Ukraine and migration flows in Central Asia. So I hope you see my slides. All is okay. If something goes wrong, please tell me. Okay. So the outline of my presentation very standard. I will start with some background information and motivation for this policy brief. I will talk about two population flows. First of all, about really new dynamics of emigration, or some people call it relocation from Russia to Central Asia countries, and also about changes in more regular labor migration from Central Asia to Russia. And I will also discuss some policy responses and possible policy recommendations concerning these two topics and changes in these population flows. Okay, it's clear that Central Asian states have strong migration links with Russia. They have a common historical, cultural background, and many Russians live in Central Asia, and at the same time, many Central Asian citizens live in Russia. And it's clear, it's well known that Russia is the major labor market for many citizens from Central Asia. And labor remittances play a very important role for households in Central Asia, and especially in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And it was clear that during, for example, pandemic times, this flow of labor remittances decreased due to travel bans, and this had a very strong and negative impact on the well-being of households and on economic conditions in Central Asia. And now we have this different kind of shock, war in Ukraine, and of course the question is how this events, how this war has affected these migration links and flows between Russia and Central Asia. At the same time, now it's clear that there is a large wave of emigration and reallocation, or some people call it relocations, from Russia after the beginning of the war in February 2022. There are already several studies on that, both quantitative and qualitative, and there are a lot of estimates how many people may left from Russia, and the range is really large. It may be from 300,000 people to even up to 2 million people. And the push factors are clear: this military draft mobilization, uncertain economic conditions, disagreement with the regime, and so on. And the major recipients of this emigration wave became former Soviet Union republics, and including, of course, Central Asian countries. And the pull factors are also clear: visa-free regimes with Russia, geographical and cultural proximity, widespread use of Russian language, and at the same time, a relatively low living costs. So, so the second question, the second issue which we studied is this war-related relocation or emigration from Russia to Central Asia. And this is really some kind of very new dynamics which we observe, which we started to observe since 2022. So which data we used in our analysis of immigration from Russia? First of all, this is Russian international migration statistics, and but mostly migration statistics of receiving countries. And we also made a survey review of existing qualitative evidence from existing immigrant surveys. Okay, if we do the first step and just take data on exits of Russians to other countries, which are publicly available in the Russian Rosstat agency, and compare year 2022 to the previous year, 2021. And also, we need to take into account that we have post-pandemic recovery in migration flows between countries, and we need to take it into account. So the vertical axis compares exits of Russians in 2022 with exits in previous year, 2021, and the horizontal axis compares it to the pre-pandemic period, to the average number of exits in the period from 2016 to 2019. So if you do that, we can see that almost all countries are distributed in three major groups. First of all, group one in this group, exits of Russians to these countries were less than in 2021, and they didn't reach the pre-pandemic period. And these countries are most of Western countries. It's clear why, because of sanctions and restrictions on travels. So in the second group of countries, we see increase in the number of exits of Russians compared to the previous year, but still the level of pre-pandemic period is not achieved. Okay, and in these countries we see such countries like Georgia or Kazakhstan. And finally, the third group in these countries, exits of Russians, they overpassed the level of pre-pandemic period, and it was large increase compared to the previous year, 2021. And in this group, we observe most of Central Asian countries, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And I may also note that one possible reason why Kazakhstan is in the second group is that because the land border between Russia and Kazakhstan was opened after the pandemic time only in the second quarter of the 2022. So it may be simply not enough time. So what this picture shows in general, that it's clearly that the geography of travels of Russians changed in 2022, and they become more focused on post-Soviet countries and redirected from Western countries. Okay, let's make more zoom on Central Asian countries, and it's clear that in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, exits of Russians to these countries increased sharply, both compared with pre-pandemic times and compared to the previous year, 2021. So in some countries, the number of exits of Russians doubled, okay, like in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. And as I mentioned, in Kyrgyzstan, the number of exits increased sharply compared to the previous year, but not yet reached the pre-pandemic period. At the same time, I have to mention it's clear that these numbers, apart from the war-induced emigration or relocation, they also include, of course, tourist flows, which were redirected from Western countries. They also include so-called card tourism, okay, because of sanctions. Russian banks were not able to use Visa and MasterCards, and many Russians came to post-Soviet countries, including Central Asian countries, to open these cards and to open bank accounts. And it's also about double counts, because we are talking about exits, but not about people, okay? So in some sense, these figures may provide a very crude upper bound estimate of the number of Russian immigrants, in this case to the Central Asian countries. And so we can say that any numbers that exceed these levels are not plausible, okay? Next, we can compare Russian data with data from Central Asian countries. So compare exits from Russia, according to Rosstat, with entries to Central Asian countries according to the national statistical bodies. So, and of course, there is a large correlation in these flows, and we see very similar pattern, seasonal pattern. For example, we see increase both in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. We see increase in exits and entries in the second quarter and in the third quarter, and then it falls in the fourth quarter and in the first quarter. But the dynamics is very similar, and we can see this large spike in 2022, in the third quarter of 2022, when partial military mobilization in Russia was announced. And as I mentioned, in Kazakhstan, as you can see, the level of the spike reached the pre-pandemic time, and in Kyrgyzstan, its level exceeded the pre-pandemic time. And the difference, you can also see that in Kyrgyzstan, there's a large gap, a relatively large gap between entries and exits to Russia. And this is because Kyrgyzstan has no land border with Russia, and many Russians come to Kyrgyzstan from other countries, not directly from Russia. And Kazakhstan has a common land border. So data from Central Asian countries confirm this pattern and this change in geography of travels. We can also look at net entries. So this is the difference between entries and exits to countries. And this is the picture for Kazakhstan. And we see the clearly very large spike in September 2022. Exactly at the time was when partial mobilization in Russia was announced, and many people came to Kazakhstan, for example, through the common land border. This is really a record high increase in net entries. So it suggests that a lot of people entered Kazakhstan but didn't exit at that time. And if you look at yearly numbers, we can see that really in 2002, it was a record high number of net entries from Russia to Kazakhstan, more than 90,000, compared, for example, to the previous year, only 17,000. And at pre-pandemic period, the maximum level was only 12,000. So this clearly shows a very large increase in entries, in net entries in 2022. So clearly shows a strong reaction to the war. What we know from existing surveys of Russian immigrants, some details on this service you will find in the text of the policy brief. We see that there is a really strong consensus among all surveys which surveyed Russian immigrants in different countries, including Central Asian countries. Strong consensus about the composition of this inflow. Russian immigrants are relatively young, so they are much younger than the average Russian population. The major group is from 25 to 34 years. They are much better educated on average. So about 80% of them have higher education or some PhD or doctorate degree. Most of them are from large Russian cities, and most of them were employed before leaving Russia and belong to the white-collar workers from IT sector, art and design, science and education, mass media. So overall, we see that the composition of this inflow is a high skill, prime age groups with relatively high incomes and from the largest Russian cities. And this is clearly not good news for Russia, I would say. This indicates about brain drain from Russia. But at the same time, this is inflow of human capital to receiving countries and also including Central Asian countries. Now I will move to the second topic, second question of our policy brief. What about changes in more standard, some sense, more regular labor migration and migration from Central Asia to Russia? So this picture shows entries of foreign citizens to Russia with the purpose of work. And we see that entries from Central Asian countries, they almost reached the level of the pre-pandemic time. So we see a strong recovery after the pandemic. but this recovery was not uniform across countries, of course. In Kazakhstan, the number of entries from Kazakhstan to Russia didn't reach the pre-pandemic time, 2019. In Kyrgyz Republic, it almost reached, and Tajikistan as well, and Uzbekistan slightly didn't achieve the pre-pandemic level. So we see a strong recovery from the pandemic times in entries with the purpose of work to Russia from Central Asian countries, but still these numbers just reached the pre-pandemic level. So it's not clear what dynamics will be further. Okay, and I mentioned a situation with, if you consider all countries, it's clear that the number of entries, if we consider the whole sample of countries, didn't reach the pre-pandemic time. This is, of course, due to entries from Western countries. We can also analyze quarterly dynamics of entries within each year. And it's interesting to compare what happened within 2022. This is a gray lines in each graph. So, and we mostly see that actually we don't see any serious change in dynamics in quarterly dynamics within years. In most cases, these lines are parallel. Lines for 2022 is parallel to the lines to the previous year. And one exception with Kyrgyzstan, we see this unusual drop in the number of entries to Russia from Kyrgyzstan in 2022 in the second quarter. But then in the third quarter, it was large increase, so it was this drop was completely compensated. Okay, we can also mention about that Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, the effect of lower base, because the flight operation between Russia and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan was opened only later. So, and we have zero numbers for 2021 for the first quarter. Okay, but also you see this orange dot, which represents 2023, the first quarter of 2023, and you see that this dot for all countries, for Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, is much higher than the level of 2022. So in the beginning of 2023, we see positive dynamics of entries. So we don't see any effect of war and related issues. And again, in Kazakhstan, dynamics is not so positive, but still dynamics is increasing. So what about the second possible indicator, new residence registrations of foreign citizens in Russia? Okay, previously I talked about entries to Russia. Now I talked about residence statistics, so residence registrations of foreign citizens. And here we see a clear positive dynamics again, recovery after the pandemic times. But again, this dynamics of recovery was not uniform across countries. Clearly, it's clear that most, if you consider Central Asian countries, most increase was due to registrations of Tajik citizens of Tajikistan. It was really record high number of new registrations from Tajikistan in 2022. But dynamics for other countries is not so clear. And I would say that they only reached the level of pre-pandemic times. And again, in Kazakhstan, was a slight decrease in the number of new residence registrations. Next, we can talk about the total number of citizens from Central Asia who are registered in Russia. So this is the stock of foreign citizens in Russia. So, and we see that in this indicator, we see that in 2022, this value of stock, total stock, didn't reach, is very far from the pre-pandemic period. In Kazakhstan, again, we can observe even a negative dynamics, and actually also, so in all countries, in all Central Asian countries, the total number of citizens registered in Russia didn't reach the pre-pandemic period. And even, for example, in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, this number decreased compared to the even previous year. So this indicates some, some possibly negative dynamics due to war and possible related political or economic issues. Okay, what we can expect that dynamics in migration flows should be reflected in remittances, in flows of remittances, because labor migrants transfer their money which they earned to home countries, to their households. What we observe in 2022 in Central Asia, we observe really record high total inflow of remittances. Okay, so for example, increase in Tajikistan in 2022 compared to 2021 was 182%, so it almost doubled. And very similar story in Uzbekistan. Except again Kazakhstan, where the inflow has increased compared to 2022, but still didn't reach the pre-pandemic period. What we can say if we analyze national data on remittances, this growth was mostly driven by remittances from Russia. And for instance, remittances from Russia to Kyrgyzstan increased by 24%, and to Uzbekistan by 160%. So we can easily calculate that without remittances from Russia, the total inflow of remittances would even decrease. So it means that remittances from other countries except Russia, they slightly decreased. And it's clear that such increase in remittances is disproportionately large if you compare it to the rise in labor migration. Actually, this rise was very non-obvious in most countries, as I told before. And it means so that significant part of this increased financial inflow was associated with capital outflow from Russia. So this is money transfers from Russian citizens who relocated to Central Asian countries. And unfortunately, it's not possible to distinguish remittances of Central Asia labor migrants who work in Russia and send their money to their households, because Russian Central Bank decided to suspend publication of detailed statistics on cross-border money transfers. Okay, and now I'm coming to some summary and discussion of our results with some possible policy perspective. So it's clear that we observe unanticipated war-related inflow of Russians to Central Asian countries in 2022. And the scale of this inflow was, I would say, pretty large. We can only make very crude estimates, and they show that this is about thousands of people to different countries. And especially if you take into account that the composition of this inflow was high skill, relatively young, white collars. These people are economically active from large Russian cities. It means that this inflow was relatively large, also compared to the respective groups of workers with similar skills and similar characteristics which exist in the domestic labor markets. So this inflow, I would expect, should have an important and positive impact on the development of receiving countries. And if you consider economic literature and predictions from the economic literature about this, you can say that it may have very positive impact on development of entrepreneurship, of new firm creation, introduction of innovations, and by the end, it should contribute to the increase in the overall labor productivity and overall economic growth. This is the standard prediction from the academic economic literature. At the same time, we don't observe any systematic policy approach of Central Asian governments to this issue. We would say that the current policy response was largely to keep status quo and possibly to increase monitoring about this on this inflow. But the general perspective, general policy perspective should be as follows. So the general idea that it would be very beneficial for national economies to absorb and to integrate this inflow, high-skill inflow of labor supply. So theoretically, from the point of view of economic theory, labor demand should adjust somehow to this increased labor supply through the expansion of capital or technological development in the long term, and national governments would try or may try to facilitate this process. Somehow this process of adjustment of labor demand and economy and integration of this high skill inflow to the economy. At the same time, also non-economic measures could be very helpful because we should take in mind that this migration differs from the standard economic migration, which is based on costs and benefits considerations, because it has been driven by push factors, by war-related factors. So it's not as usually migration is driven by a combination of push and pull factors. This wave was driven mostly by exogenous push factors. And this induced large uncertainty for immigrants, for those who are relocated. At the same time, suggests worse fit with the labor demand, with the structure of the labor demand of receiving countries. And in this sense, non-economic policy measures could be very useful. For example, to increase, to provide more information about existing rules and laws, migration rules and stay rules, to grant equal access to public services and to infrastructure to these migrants. For example, they decide to open some new business or develop entrepreneurship or make investments to the economy of Central Asian countries. And we can also discuss possible future perspective on this inflow. It's clear that as for today, already many Russian migrants, which were in Central Asia, possibly they moved to other countries, and maybe some of them returned back to Russia. But at the same time, we need to think that major push factors, they are still on the scene. So they still exist, and very likely that they persist in the future. At the same time, the costs of moving to, for example, developed countries to Western countries and barriers of this movement are relatively high. And I would say that in medium term, at least, post-Soviet countries and including, of course, Central Asian countries will remain very reliable alternative for relocation and for living for significant part of Russian migrants who would like to exit Russia. And in this sense, Central Asian countries have a really unique opportunity to use this arrived human capital for the sake of their economic and technological development. And also about Central Asian migration to Russia. So in our policy brief, we didn't observe almost any negative reaction to the war at least in 2022. On the one hand, we have increase in entries for job purposes to Russia, but at the same time, on the other hand, we see some decrease in the number of registered people, which possibly indicates some wariness of labor migrants from Central Asia about economic and policy situation in Russia and future prospects. We observe a record high inflow of remittances in 2022, but it should not be taken as at face value, possibly due to the capital outflow from Russia, and reflects increased transfers of Russian migrants and Russian relocants to Central Asian countries. We can say that in 2022, this inflow declining, but again, it's difficult to say to what extent remittances from labor migrants, from Central Asian labor migrants in Russia are affected by these changes, because we don't have data yet. So, and this shows that national Central Asian governments, of course, should keep monitoring these trends in migration flows and remittances, and possibly have some ready policy decisions if things go in the wrong direction. For example, consider alternative labor markets in other countries, increase job creation in domestic labor markets, and possibly support labor-intensive economic activities within Central Asian countries. So thank you for your attention, and my presentation is finished.
Thank you, Aleksey, and for extremely interesting presentation. And I think we can now move to the discussion session of our webinar. And if you want to start asking questions, please raise your hands. I think we can start from Asel Murzakova, our colleague from Multi Society Research Institute. Asel, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for your interesting presentation. I just would like to emphasize that the analysis of the influx of Russian citizens should take into account individuals who were formerly migrants in Russia and have since acquired Russian citizenship before returning to their home countries. So it's ex-Kyrgyz or Tajik or Kazakh citizens who returned to states after obtaining Russian citizenship. And I think it is important to accurately assess the proportion of these individuals within the analysis flow to ensure a comprehensive understanding. Additionally, considering the unique circumstance of this group, I think it is initial to explore whether recommendations tailored to their needs would be differ from those which you addressed for government regarding relocants. So thank you very much for your presentation.
How we proceed? Should I answer or collect
Yes,
all
yes.
questions?
Yes, I think better you answer, but shortly. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. I completely agree with you. And this is actually, personally for me, very interesting question about the proportion of such people in this total inflow of people who received Russian citizenship recently and originally from Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, or other Central Asian countries. Unfortunately, I didn't see any statistics and information which would allow to distinguish or at least estimate the number of these people. And for example, survey of immigrants of Russia, they don't cover these people. They mostly focus on Russian citizens, on the Russians who relocated. Yes, I agree that it may be pretty, maybe not a small proportion of these people, and in this sense, any policy perspective for this migration should be somehow adjusted in this sense. And for example, integration and relocation, integration of these people would be much easier. And in some sense, this is okay, nationals of Central Asia who come back from Russia. Yes, agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Damir. Damir? What's the next?
Thank you, Aleksey, for your talk. Some data were really fascinating, and probably one of my questions after those. But overall, thank you for colleagues at UCA to initiating this webinar series. My first question is about remittances. The data from 2022 really shows amazing growth, in all countries, but not in Kyrgyzstan. So it's one observation interesting. I would think that Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan are interesting in terms of real estate market. A friend in Tashkent was saying that this construction boom in Tashkent was practically saved by people bringing money and buying property. So just in that respect, what's your take from these numbers, especially Tajikistan case, which almost seems to be doubled? The question is, what drives these numbers up? You already mentioned, but maybe you have more insights. Secondly, presence of relocants here. This is a term used mostly in terms of economic impact. I think it's quite difficult to estimate, for example, the contribution to, I don't know, economic growth, very saying big with big words, but I guess their contribution to GDP elsewhere, besides their consumption and kind of impact on real estate rent market, I think there is little we can do in terms of seeing any impact. So anything you thought on that respect? I think these are two questions. Look forward to reading your brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damir, for your questions. First of all, remittances, yes, in 2022, they're record high, and I wouldn't think that this is, of course, due to remittances coming from labor migrants, from Central Asian labor migrants who work in Russia and send their money back to households. One reason is transfers of Russian relocants and general capital outflow from Russia. Another reason is rubles appreciation. Yes, but this is actually what I can say. Unfortunately, I don't have any explanation why, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, this growth was less than in Uzbekistan. Okay, maybe Kanat can suggest some, possible explanations for that, but I don't have, unfortunately, such, country-specific expertise.
Yes. Okay. Can I
Yes,
intervene?
sure, of course.
Thank you. I want to introduce first of all Damir Isanalir. He is represents here our partner organization, ISDC, located in Berlin. And also we need to say that ISDC is a host for the Life in Kyrgyzstan study, panel study and also conference. And we are good friends and we are partners in this LiK Conference webinar series, which we start today. Question about remittances. Need to say that remittances here in the policy brief, we saw total inflow of money transfers. But if we look on the outflow in Kyrgyzstan in 2022, observed very interesting picture because, for example, we also saw quite a big outflow of money from Kyrgyzstan, again back to Russia first, and also to many other countries. Like there are a lot of remittances never observed, for example, to China, to Turkey, to Gulf countries, the United Arab Emirates, and such kind of partners. And it also reflects huge informal activities implemented as by Russian citizens relocated to Kyrgyzstan and making different kind of operation, but also Kyrgyz private sector. And we need to also say that during last 2 years in Kyrgyzstan observed tremendous increase of import with different countries. We increased different import from China hugely. It's like growth on 25, 30, 50% every year. And last year we observed big increase of import of cars to Kyrgyzstan and informal trade from Kyrgyzstan to Russia. But this kind of activity is also very interesting to observe. It requires more resources. We're analyzing it, and we also think that we may produce some other, let's say, aspects of this analysis later, probably this year, probably next year, because it looks like, as Aleksey mentioned, that we need to be ready that this will continue for a big period, and we can't say that it will stop tomorrow. So we need to think how Kyrgyzstan will also. Kyrgyzstan already exploiting. We see increase of economic growth. We see growth of many sectors, as you said, also construction sector, and also we see immovable property prices in Bishkek and Dosh increased, specifically starting from the second or first quarter of 2022, and it looks like that there are a lot of different activities ongoing. That's why we think that formulating correct policy response is very important from a strategic perspective for Kyrgyzstan and also for other Central Asian countries, because we, for example, we can expect that this year, after the let's say election in Russia, which will be in March 17th, we may expect maybe worsening situation again in Russia, and maybe a new wave of people from Russia may again came to available countries. And since we don't have visa regime, we may expect that it may occur. And for that case, we should say that Kyrgyz government and also other Central Asian national governments should formulate the strategy and approach and open discussion how it might be utilized in a more, let's say, positive way for the development of Central Asian economies. I think that Bogdan Kravchenko, the former Dean of Graduate School of Development and now advisor to the rector, want to say, Bogdan, floor is yours.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know, the Russian immigration to Central Asia is a very, very unusual phenomenon. It's totally different than what happened in the 70s when Russians came here as part of Soviet investments to build factories. And it's also very different from, say, the people that end up in London, rich people that ended up driving housing prices extremely high, and their contribution to and wanted to invest, to have secure investments in that country. So one of the questions I think would be interesting to look at is what would be the perception on the Kyrgyz side of the benefit of Russian immigration, of these Russian migrants? Yeah, I mean, apart from the fact that people are complaining that you can't get cheap prices for apartments now, and of course the benefit that there is an increase in consumption. But the question then is that when, for example, if these immigrants, let's say all of the people in IT, ended up in a place like the United States or Germany, there's a very big industry that can absorb them. But when they come here, the IT sector is not particularly large. And I wonder whether the Russian immigrants are entrepreneurs, actually want to develop businesses, or are they simply, in the case of IT, they have their clients either in Russia or somewhere abroad that they continue to serve and make a salary from it, or they are living off their investments, and when that runs out, well, they'll have to do something. I find it difficult to see. I mean, it would be interesting to understand if, and I find this difficult, they are going to become investors in anything and job creators in the country, because this could be simply a transit zone to somewhere else. So it's a very, very specific cohort. No country, nowhere has that happened, except of course in Georgia. And that would be interesting to see what happened in Georgia. But that's, I guess, a separate study. And of course, this is not without controversy inside the country. So I'm not so sure what kind of regulations the government should do for a specific group of migrants, other than having regulations that are good for business overall. Apart from easy registration, electronic citizenship, or whatever you call it, places like Estonia and others are doing. Your views. And hopefully you can explore some of these other things in continuation of the paper, looking at it a little bit from the Kyrgyz labor market side, because it could very well be that they are competing in a sector where there is already quite a lot of skill, because the market is so small, and can it absorb actually more? Your views.
See, can you?
Yeah, finished.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I would agree with you absolutely. It's very important and interesting question. So to what extent this migration flow is to some extent transitory, and to what extent these people are going to invest and create jobs here, and some can stay here for some time. And this is important to understand what to do, what should be policy reaction should be in this case, and do we need any specific regulations or just need to make policies which are generally positive for the economic development and for development of entrepreneurship and so on. This is a good question, and I didn't see any research on that. So it would be very nice to go in these details and to study this issue, and especially also touch the question of impact on the labor market and competition. For example, to what extent these people compete with the locals, and to what extent they complement existing employment structure and existing economy. And also, this is, I think, related to the question which was asked by Damir. It was his second question about the possible impact of this migration flow on Central Asian countries, on receiving countries. And it may be very different dimensions of this impact. Of course, at first glance, what is clearly seen is higher prices in the housing market, but it's not the end of the story. It's also increased consumption. It's also related to possible investments and job creations, because many of these people are young, economically active, and they really create some entrepreneurship and small business, how to say, and invest time and some money in that. And it's also related to the issue that for the migrants themselves, situation is not very clear. Their situation is very uncertain, because the push factors are out of their control. Okay, and so this service, for example, show that these immigrants themselves, they don't know where they will be and what they were doing, for example, in a few months. Okay, so this is a very complex question, but for sure it should be studied in many directions and discussed somehow in order to understand what's the best strategy could be in this sense.
Okay, thank you, Aleksey. I can add to the question raised by Bogdan that, for example, Kyrgyz government was initiated digital nomad initiative, and it was realized by the Ministry of Economy, and about 4,000 individuals applied for that, and about 1,600, I think, people receive the status, which provides not so. We can say it's easier, but it's we can say it's better, but we can say that it was easier conditions for registration, opening easier processing for the bank operation, for example, for if you are non-resident of Kyrgyz Republic, so registration is easier, and also you can open bank accounts, and so we can say such kind of initiative also might be quite good. You can, I think Tilman want to join our discussion. And another options which we can say that making easy registration or entering, and also process for digitalization. So if it's possible to work not only for the Kyrgyz citizens, but also for non-residents. For example, for tax registration might becoming the process again more attractive in the eyes of potential relocancy from Russia to Central Asia. Such kind of things may signal that Central Asian governments, let's say, welcoming and without declarative any announcement, but making the process easier. What we see now that first Kazakh government and then Kyrgyz government introduce exclusion of visa run practice. So, and now people need to, let's say forcing them to let's say registration, can say, so make life a little bit more complicated. So I don't think that it's maybe productive way of welcoming people. Maybe making online registration might be more attractive way, and also increase number of registration for the people, because they don't need to go and wait long waiting procedures in these centers for the people where they need pass registration. This kind of policies might be good options, as I say, and move people a little bit thinking when they selecting their potential areas. Anyway, we can say that influx of Russian migrants brings money to the hotel businesses, to travel agencies, to many different services, including restaurants and cafes. They increase substantially. And we can say that this is also very good for Kyrgyz economy. And potentially we also see that construction sector also gain, and it's new, the taxes, it's new jobs also. So there is no big, so it's possible to utilize it in more positive manner, I can say. Not only trading of goods from China or re-exporting it to Russia, but there are also a lot of internal possibilities. Tilman joined us, and I think maybe Tilman want to say a couple of words. Hello, Tilman.
Hi, thank you so much, and lovely to be here. I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I really appreciate that you made the effort to put on the Life in Kyrgyzstan seminar series. So I think we should grow this so that people around the world can connect and learn, just like you discussed now, about all the topics. I mean, there's so many topics, and what I find so exciting about the Life in Kyrgyzstan study is that it allows us to connect data across different domains. Yeah, so we can look at all sorts of different issues and the intersections of these issues and how they play out, which goes way beyond what most other data sources, I think, allow us to do. Plus, of course, the long-term structural changes that we can observe. I hope we get another wave this year that would then add to the body of evidence that we have and allow us to make, pre and post pandemic comparisons of these issues. So thank you very much for hosting, and yeah, thank you also for this important topic in today's seminar. I think it's really valuable that you throw light on that. But I look forward to the series continuing, and thank you.
Thank you, Tilman. Thanks. And can we ask other participants to say something? I saw one of the comments from Kairat about that Kyrgyz migrants goes to other countries. Can you comment it? No?
Thank you, Dr. Kanat.
I think if it's from you can speak Russian.
Здесь хорошо, спасибо большое. Это я написал, когда возник вопрос, почему потоки не так выросли или остались, тогда как, например, в Таджикистан потоки выросли в 2022 году. И я хотел заметить, что последние годы у нас диверсификация, по-моему, активнее происходит в другие страны после начала СВО. И в связи с этим, наверное, сейчас вот идет какой-то процесс реадаптации наших мигрантов из дальнего зарубежья. Поэтому потоки с Россией, наверное, не так, как раньше. Но если те кризисы предыдущие посмотреть, то кыргызские мигранты быстрее восстанавливали посткризисные потоки, чем узбекские и таджикские мигранты. Это и после 2008 года было, это было и после кризиса крымского, 14-м, по-моему, да? В общем, всегда. Но в этот раз, похоже, вот диверсификация более интенсивно идет среди кыргызских мигрантов в другие страны. В связи с этим и поток сейчас, не такой в России в 2022 году был. А так, спасибо большое. Очень интересная презентация, очень интересный доклад. Очень много вопросов, которые появились у нас после презентации. Спасибо.
Алексей, вы можете тоже по-русски отвечать, наверное.
Окей, я могу по-русски, могу не по-русски. Но я только соглашусь, к сожалению, у меня нет такой глубокой экспертизы отдельно по странам Центральной Азии, чтобы сказать, что было раньше, что сейчас, и как-то объяснить возможную гетерогенность и различия между странами в влиянии войны, да, в том числе и с точки зрения миграции, и с точки зрения remittances. Вот. Но я думаю, в целом соглашусь, что это очень интересное направление для дальнейших исследований, возможно, более тщательных. И я надеюсь, что вот наш policy brief и этот семинар, они поднимут вопросы, которые мы потом будем анализировать и уже более тщательно и, может быть, более сфокусированно на отдельные аспекты, в частности, на влияние на экономическое развитие и другие аспекты этого потока Центральной Азии. И я думаю, что мы уже можем наблюдать это влияние, несмотря на то, что времени достаточно прошло мало еще. И не только это выражается в уровне цен, но и уже каких-то серьезных осязаемых выгодах для принимающих стран. Несмотря на всю неопределенность ситуации и в каком-то смысле непонятность того, что будет дальше. Вот
Спасибо
такой,
большое.
пожалуй, мой комментарий.
Богдан?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that when you are writing when you're writing the policy brief and the list of questions that you have for further study, don't forget that migration is always controversial from the receiving side, and it's just having a horde of people who are well qualified does not the benefit may be seen differently on the receiving side, and we see reactions in Georgia and this sort of thing. So I think much of it will depend the extent to which Russian immigrants over here, and do we have any evidence, start up new businesses. And that will be and do investments in the country. Maybe it's too soon to study that, but even a smaller kind of smaller scale survey of immigrants using some kind of snowball technique or something like that would be interesting, because the impression that people have is that these people are working for companies abroad, they're living on capital, they participate in the avoiding of sanctions by selling goods, and all of this brings certain benefit to the Kyrgyz economy that miraculously increased the flow, the export of lumber by 18,000%. But its impact on the economy and creating new jobs and using these skilled people to create new opportunities is something that should be drilled down. These are impressions people have. It would be interesting to study this, maybe through a small scale survey. interviewing 150 people may give you some insight into this, and we may be totally surprised by the results.
Thank you, Bogdan. It's a very valuable comment. I think we should include these options in our future fundraising and preparing new proposals. So the issue that we need to find funding for the future research, but yes, we'll include it in our approach. It's very interesting. From my side, I want to add that by my information, the significant outflow of people from Russia, Kyrgyz people with Russian passports, who are trying to reach US, for example, through Mexico, and now it's becoming prohibited, and many people go to jail in Mexico. And some people said that about 50,000 Kyrgyz moved from Russia, not to Kyrgyzstan, but to US informally, not illegally, you can say. Another fact, I would say that it was in the media recently, on February 8th, was opened there was website, Migrant KG. It's a department of the Kyrgyz Ministry of Labor, Social Protection and Migration. And there was an opportunity to work legally in UK. And during several hours, there was filled 26,000 applications during 6 hours. And from that amount, 16,000 passed first step procedure. So it demonstrates that the potential willingness of Kyrgyz migrants move not to Russia, but to other countries is extremely high. And it also demonstrates that people recognize how dangerous to be probably this year, last 2 years, and in the future to be in Russia and want to see, but still many of people don't see any other opportunities. So it's also an issue for national governments in Kyrgyzstan and in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, probably that they need to work in that direction also. About negative consequences of migration, we say yes, increasing domestic prices is one thing, but also we see substantial economic growth. At least in Kyrgyzstan, it was recalculated, and for the 2029, it was 6.2%. Now it was recalculated to 9%, which is one of the biggest economic growth for the last, let's say, 20 years. We have only 1 year with more than that figure. And but distribution of welfare is not reflect this because in 2022 we have the same poverty level after post-pandemic. In 2021 it was 33.3%, and it's remained on the same level. So we can say that some people earn money, but low income groups of more vulnerable population groups don't have access, cannot exploit it, and we need to think how Kyrgyz government also should think and work on the directions to support lowest income groups of populations. National Statistical Committee provided some data for 2022, and it shows that first 2 quintiles worsen the food nutrition in the lowest groups of the people, protein deficit and fat deficit consumption increase. So rich people becoming richer, but poor people becoming poor, and growing inequality. It's one of the reasons why people may negatively react on migration, for example. That also should be one of the policy, let's say, area where Kyrgyz government, that potentially it may be also true for the other national governments in the region. Do we have new questions? We slowly move to the end, probably. Do we have anybody? Chris, do you want to say something? No. Aleksey?
Let's give the last word to Aleksey.
Yes, we can say if there are no questions, probably Aleksey can, let's say, because we have some ideas how to continue this in the future, and we may, for example, now discuss openly and say that, Aleksey, floor is yours if you want to say something on that matter.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I think that this some kind of study should be continued, as I told. And of course, migration is an important part of the whole story, but not the only one. Also, other parts of the story, but another, how to say, mechanisms of adjustment to this war and related issues, which are very important for Central Asian countries. And they also, how to say, should be studied in line with impacts on migration. And yes, I would say that we should continue this research and maybe to make more focused studies on different issues. Can be a large program on many different dimensions, which can have some useful policy implications at the end. Thank you.
We basically finish, and we don't want to continue bother you if you don't have questions. From our side, I would say that recently becoming accessible National Statistical Committee data set on labor survey for the 2022. So we can think, and we try to find some traces of this influx of Russian migration in 2022 and how its effect on the labor market based on the household level data. Since we have about more than from 5,000, it's about half of the urban, and we may say it's about most of these urban residents are from Bishkek and also we will try to capture if there any change on the labor market movement specifically in the periods where we see massive influx of Russian people for maybe in September. It should be some traces of this effect. We'll try to work on that. And thanks a lot for all people who spend their times. And we will continue our efforts to work further and try to produce more this kind of reports and improving what we already did. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
And we'll see you for next month's webinar.
Yes. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.